just 9 years old. So at a 9-year-old age, she is not full grown. She won't reach her full-grown size until around 15 to 20 years of age. So she still has some growing to do. She actually has a good look at her dorsal fin. It has a slight lean to it. So part of the answer to the dorsal fin being straight versus curved, genetics plays a factor as well. So if it starts to develop a small curve when they're younger, it actually can continue to grow into that curve, and it does not affect their well-being whatsoever. The biggest thing we see is that we need to help them exfoliate their skin under their dorsal fin, which we do so with a loofah glove by giving them a loofah glove rub down at least 1 time a day. Now, during your guys' time here, we're going to be focusing our talk on the care, welfare, and research that these killer whales have participated in order to help their wild counterparts. So some quick information just about killer whales as a whole species. They occupy oceans around the world. Now fortunately, killer whales as a whole species are not threatened or endangered or near extinction. But there is a smaller population of killer whales that lives up near Washington in the United States called the southern resident killer whales. Now these killer whales are facing an endangered population and are facing decreasing numbers. So we're going to be talking a little bit about our time here, how our care of our killer whales here at SeaWorld is actually helping that population up in Puget Sound. One of my favorite things to talk about as far as how these killer whales have helped that population is that the 2 male killer whales we take care of, Cayucet and Tuar, participated in what we call a hearing study. So who here has been to the doctor and done a basic hearing test where you hear a beep and you push a button? Very cool. So we taught the whales to do something very similar. Obviously they don't have hands like you and I, so we had to get creative.
Oh, hi.
Now this here is Sakari. This is Kamea's older sister. Sakari's 13 years old. As you guys can see, she is quite a bit bigger than Kamea. To be exact, she's about 1,000 pounds larger than Kamea is right now. Both Kamea and Sakari were born here at SeaWorld San Antonio. All 5 of our killer whales were born in human care, but these 2 were born at our facility to their mother, Takara, who is over there in the middle with Malin at the moment. So back to this research study about the killer whale's hearing. So you might have heard Sakari make a sound a little bit ago. It sounded a little bit like blowing a raspberry. No, just like that. That is her blowhole on top of her head. That's where they make different vocalizations. So what we trained the male killer whales to do for this hearing test is to station underwater, and when they heard a sound, they blew that raspberry sound, which would expel bubbles into the water. So through a series of trial and error of testing their hearing, their exact hearing range was found. And the baseline for what was found across all of the killer whales from all SeaWorld parks was that the hearing was about 5 hertz to 80 hertz. Sorry, kilohertz on the upper end. And to give you a reference, humans' hearing is only up to 20,000 hertz. So they can hear at a much higher frequency than we can. Now, why this information is important, as I was mentioning, to the wild population of killer whales, the southern resident killer whales to be exact, as an endangered population, is that they are facing threats through boating traffic. So boating traffic up in that area produces a lot of noise in their environment, and it is showing to affect things like their hunting patterns, their communication with each other, and even where they choose to spend time. So our hope is through the knowledge of their exact hearing range and knowing that things like boating traffic is affecting how wild killer whales behave in their natural environment, that legislation passed up in that area will be able to enact acoustical sanctuaries for these killer whales and prevent boating traffic from going there. Now, to give you a reference, there is only about 870 of the southern resident killer whales left up in that area. session right here. Now, just for reference, this is what every day looks like here behind the scenes. We're just doing an interaction with the killer whales that would take place with or without you guys here joining us today. It looks like Takara is participating in a little bit of an exercise session. So just like you and I, it's important that we exercise on a regular basis. Wild populations of killer whales are getting a majority of their exercise through hunting for food. Obviously, the killer whales here at SeaWorld San Antonio have their food provided to them in its entirety on a daily basis. Now, Sakari here is eating around 90 pounds of restaurant quality fish on a daily basis, whereas our biggest eater, is eating over 120 pounds on a daily basis. So we go through lots of fish here. They eat a variety of fish, capelin, herring, salmon, squid, and depending on the time of year, some others. As far as the exercise session goes, like I said, wild killer whales will be getting a majority of their exercise through just everyday living, how they're going through their day looking for food. So we have to supplement that exercise into the lives of these killer whales, and we can do that in some creative ways. They are trained to do a variety of these different high-energy behaviors that allow us to interact with them and get their blood pumping. Now, these are some of the behaviors that you see in the presentations that we do here on a daily basis. Did everyone have a chance to go to our 2 o'clock presentation? Yeah? So you guys got to see a lot of those high energy behaviors there. And even though we are doing those in presentations, those are some behaviors that we do every single day with or without you to help us care for these amazing animals right here. If you guys get your cameras ready, specifically your video cameras, I think you might have a good shot here at this slide out right here of Takara demonstrating what could be used as a natural hunting technique to get an animal that would be in a shallow area of the pool. So everyone turn your attention right here to the shallow slide up as Takara, the matriarch of our pod, makes her appearance. Now she made that look so effortless. Killer whales that do have very nice smooth skin. As I was mentioning with the male killer whales, and we help them to exfoliate their skin. Killer whales shed their skin at a much higher rate than you and I to help them maintain that sleek exterior. Their body is covered in a nice thick layer of blubber that also makes them streamlined. Malin is asking Takara for a behavior that we call innovate. So Takara is adding in a little bit of a flair, for lack of a better word, to the same behavior that she's doing over and over again. The criteria of the innovate behavior is just that the whales have to do something different. That the whales have to do something different than what they did before. So I think Takara did the same vocalization on that one. So Malin's going to give her a 1, 2, 3 second pause and move on. But that innovate behavior was another research study that our killer whales participated in. So they were trained on the same hand signal over and over, that in order to earn reinforcement, they had to produce a different behavior. So they were utilizing this study with the killer whales and some other animals around the park to test their creativity. Creativity has been known to also maybe show that they are, as we know, a very highly intelligent animal. As I mentioned, Takara is the matriarch of our pod here at SeaWorld San Antonio. And what does that mean? Killer whales live in matriarchal societies, which means within a pod, the most dominant animal is typically the eldest female. So that here for us is Takara. She is 32 years old. Now, something that I find particularly fascinating about the fact that females are the most dominant animals of a pod is going back to their overall size. So as I mentioned, the male killer whales are about double in size as the females, yet the females are still the ones who are in charge. Now this dominance in animals can be seen in a variety of ways. Typically dominant animals will be controlling the food source of who gets food. A matriarch would probably focus on feeding her offspring before letting others participate in a larger food supply. But something else that's very cool about killer whales is depending on where they live in the ocean is going to depend on what their primary food source is. So you'll hear all the time that killer whales are the apex predators of the ocean. What does that mean? That means that they have no natural predators. The only threats that killer whales have are humans, unfortunately. So some ways that you guys can help to be a positive impact in wild killer whales' lives is by the basic things like recycling, purchasing sustainable seafood, and stuff like that. But depending on where killer whales live in the ocean will depend on what they hunt. And they have actually developed a variety of different hunting techniques. Now Sakari's going to show off her tail right there, give you a little killer whale wave. Just like other whales and dolphins, their tail flukes are unique to each individual. And on killer whales, another thing that's unique to each individual is that gray saddle patch on their back. These are identifying markers that researchers following whales in the ocean will utilize to help them identify members of a pod.